Mechanic's son saves billionaire's car, and the ending is surprising. Tyler Wilson ran through the corridors of the office building, clutching the red fire extinguisher he'd grabbed from his father's shop. The smell of burning smoke filled his lungs as his 13-year-old legs carried him as fast as possible to the underground parking lot. The luxury car was completely engulfed in flames when he arrived. Flames shot from the hood and began spreading across the sleek black body. Tyler didn't think twice. He aimed the extinguisher and sprayed the chemical onto the fire, moving around the vehicle with impressive agility. "My God, what are you doing, boy?" a voice shouted behind him. Tyler didn't stop to answer. He kept fighting the fire until the last flames were out. Only then did he turn and see a well-dressed man in a dark suit, neatly combed gray hair, and a look of shock on his face. Other men stood frozen in the background, all stunned by what had just happened. "Is this your car, sir?" Tyler asked, still panting. Richard Thompson couldn't believe what he'd just witnessed. His Cadillac, worth over $400,000, had been saved by a boy who couldn't have been older than 13. While he and his executives had stood there like statues, this kid had had the courage to act. "Yes, it's my car," Richard replied, his voice still shaky. "You just saved a considerable fortune, young man. What's your name?" "Tyler Wilson, sir. I work downstairs in the shop with my dad." Richard studied the boy more closely. He was covered in grease, wearing a plain shirt and worn-out sneakers, yet there was something in his eyes, an impressive determination for someone so young. "I need to reward you somehow. What do you want? Money? A gift?" Tyler shook his head. "You don't have to, sir. My dad always taught me that when we see someone in need, we help, without expecting anything in return." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. Richard was stunned. In his 55 years of life, 40 of them spent in the business world, he had never met anyone who refused a reward, especially not a child from a humble background. "Your father must be a very wise man," Richard said, genuinely impressed. "I'd love to meet him." Tyler hesitated for a moment. He looked down at his feet before meeting Richard's gaze again. "He's working in the shop right now, sir, but I'm not sure it's a good idea." "Why wouldn't it be?" "He doesn't really like important people. Says he's had trouble with them in the past." Richard's curiosity was piqued, but before he could ask more, Tyler was already walking toward the shop. Richard followed, accompanied by two of his executives. The Wilson Auto Shop was in the basement of the same office building where Richard kept his penthouse office. It was a small, modest space, with tools scattered across workbenches and the distinct smell of oil and metal. A man in his 50s was bent over the engine of an economy car, focused on his work. "Dad, someone's here to see you," Tyler announced. Jack Wilson lifted his head and wiped his hands on an oil-stained rag. When his eyes landed on Richard, his expression changed completely. His face tensed, and the muscles in his neck tightened. "What do you want here, Richard?" Richard was shocked. This man knew him by name, and by the tone of his voice, he didn't have fond memories of him. "You know me?" "Of course I know you. How could I forget the man who destroyed my life 15 years ago?" Tyler looked from one to the other, confused by the tension that had settled in the room. Richard was trying to remember where he had seen that face before. "Jack Wilson," said the mechanic, noticing the lack of recognition. "I worked at your first auto parts factory. I was your employee for 8 years until the day you fired me for cause, claiming I was stealing materials." Richard's memory slowly pieced itself together. 15 years ago, his company was still small, and he had entrusted personnel management to others. He vaguely recalled a theft case that led to the dismissal of an exemplary employee. "Jack, I remember you. But if I'm not mistaken, there was evidence—" "Fabricated evidence," Jack interrupted, his voice heavy with bitterness. "I never stole so much as a bolt from your company. But who would believe the word of a simple mechanic over his supervisors?" Tyler felt his chest tighten. He had never heard his father speak like that, with so much pain in his voice. He knew the family had gone through financial struggles years ago, but he never knew the details. "Dad, what exactly happened?" Tyler asked softly. Jack took a deep breath. He looked at his son, then at Richard. After I was fired, no one wanted to hire me. The news spread through the industry. We went almost 2 years without steady income. Your mother had to clean 3 different houses just so we wouldn't starve. We lost our home, our car, almost everything. Richard felt a growing weight in his chest. He was beginning to understand the gravity of the situation and his indirect responsibility in it. "And why did you never tell me this, Dad?" Tyler asked, his eyes glistening. "Because I didn't want you growing up with hate in your heart, son. Hate destroys a person from the inside. I chose to teach you that there's always a way to start over, to build something new." Tyler turned to Richard, who was visibly shaken by the revelations. "That's why you almost lost your car today," Tyler said with surprising firmness for his age. "My father taught me to do good even to those who've wronged us. If it were up to human justice alone, I would have let your car burn." Richard didn't know how to respond. He felt ashamed and guilty. At that moment, one of the executives accompanying him received a call and whispered something in his ear. "Richard, we need to go back urgently. Edward is looking for you. Something about the audit issue." Richard nodded to show he'd heard, but his eyes remained fixed on Jack. "I have to go now, but I want to talk more with you both. Can I come back tomorrow?" Jack didn't answer right away. He turned his attention back to the engine he was working on. "This shop is the only place I have in the world. If you want to come back, that's your choice." Richard headed to his office with his mind in turmoil. The image of Tyler fighting the flames and the pain in Jack's eyes wouldn't leave his thoughts. Edward Miller, his partner of 10 years, was waiting in his office with a stack of documents on the desk. "Where were you, Richard? We have a serious problem with the audit. Some irregularities were found in the records of former employees." "What kind of irregularities?" "Terminations that may have been legally questionable. If this leaks to the press, it could damage our corporate image." Richard sank heavily into his chair. The coincidence was too unsettling. "Edward, do you remember an employee named Jack Wilson? He was fired 15 years ago for alleged theft." Edward visibly tensed but tried to hide it. "I vaguely remember. Why do you ask?" "I just ran into him. He swears he was fired unfairly." "Richard, you know how these people are. They always try to play the victim to get some advantage. You can't listen to that kind of talk." Richard noticed something odd in Edward's reaction, but decided not to press the matter at that moment. He spent the rest of the day trying to focus on work, but his mind kept drifting back to the basement workshop. That night, Richard went home earlier than usual. Emily, his wife of 25 years, immediately noticed something was bothering him. "Did something happen at work today?" she asked, serving dinner. Richard told her about the fire, about Tyler, and about running into Jack again. Emily listened quietly, but when he mentioned the mechanic's name, she stopped eating. "Jack Wilson? A mechanic? You know him?" Emily grew thoughtful for a few seconds. "A long time ago, when I was pregnant with Ashley, my car broke down in the middle of the street. It was a desperate situation because I was in pain and needed to get to the hospital quickly. A mechanic stopped to help me. He fixed the car right there and even gave me money for gas. When I offered to pay him, he refused, said he had a pregnant wife at home and understood my situation." Richard stared at her in silence. His name was Jack Wilson. The revelation hit Richard like a punch to the gut. Jack had helped his wife in a critical moment, and years later, he had been responsible for destroying the man's life. "Emily, our daughter was born healthy because you made it to the hospital in time." "Exactly. If that man hadn't helped me, I don't know what would have happened." Richard spent the night wide awake, tossing in bed and rethinking every decision he'd made over the years. By morning, he was determined to talk to Jack again. He went down to the workshop early. Tyler was there helping his father organize the tools before starting the workday. "Can I talk to both of you?" Jack didn't look up from the tools. "Go ahead. First, I want to apologize. I know it won't undo what happened, but I need you to know I never meant to hurt anyone unfairly." "Intentions didn't feed my family during those months of unemployment," Jack replied, still not looking at Richard. Tyler, sensing the tension, decided to step in. "Dad, at least let him speak." Jack finally looked at Richard. Fine, but make it quick. I've got work to do. Richard took a deep breath. My wife told me a story last night about a mechanic who helped her when she was pregnant over 20 years ago. His name was Jack Wilson. Jack stopped what he was doing. A look of surprise crossed his face. A pregnant woman with a broken-down car on Fifth Avenue? Exactly. Emily? Yes. Silence settled over the workshop. Tyler glanced between them, trying to understand the situation. She was really scared, Jack recalled, his voice softer. Said it was her first child and she was afraid she wouldn't make it to the hospital in time. Our daughter Ashley was born perfectly healthy because you helped her that day, Richard said, his voice thick with emotion. And I never even knew it was you. Tyler felt a mix of pride and confusion. Pride that his father had helped a woman in distress, but confusion because that woman was the wife of the man who had caused their family so much trouble. Small world, Jack murmured. Richard saw an opening in the shift of tone. Jack, I want to make peace with the past. I want to offer you a job at my current company. No, Jack answered immediately. Why? Because I've learned to live with my dignity intact. This workshop may be small, but it's mine. Here I'm in charge, here I decide. I don't want to depend on bosses anymore. Tyler admired his father's firmness, but also noticed that Richard was genuinely trying to correct a past mistake. What if it wasn't as an employee? Richard insisted. What do you mean? As a partner, a business partnership. Jack laughed sarcastically. Partnership? I barely have money to buy new tools and you want to talk about a partnership? Richard fell silent for a few seconds, watching Tyler, who was following the conversation with interest. Can I ask your son a question? Jack nodded. Tyler, do you like mechanics? I love it, sir. Since I was little, I've been here in the shop learning from my dad. What can you do? Tyler looked at his father, who gave an approving nod. I can diagnose most problems just by the sound of the engine. I also know how to replace parts and do basic repairs. Richard was impressed. Just by the sound. Want to see? Tyler asked excitedly. Jack started the engine of a car that was in for a checkup. Tyler leaned in, put his ear near the hood, and stayed quiet for a few seconds. The issue is with the fuel pump. It's working, but not at the right pressure. In about a week, the car will start failing on hills, and then won't start at all. Richard looked at Jack, who confirmed with a nod. He's right. I found that out yesterday after 2 hours of tests. Tyler, where did you learn that? From the manuals my dad keeps here in the shop. Also from old books I find at Mrs. Jenkins' junkyard. She always sets aside the ones about cars for me. Richard was more and more impressed by the boy. Do you want to study more about mechanics? Take a technical course? Tyler lowered his head. I really do, sir, but courses are expensive and money is tight here at home. Richard felt his heart tighten. Here was a talented young man being held back by financial circumstances, just like his father had been in the past. Jack, can I make a different proposal? What proposal? I'll pay for Tyler's education. In return, once he graduates, he'll work with me for 2 years. After that, he can decide whether to stay or start his own business. Tyler looked at his father with hopeful eyes. Dad, can I accept? Tyler, in life we don't take favors from anyone. But what if it's not a favor? Richard interrupted. What if it's an investment? I believe in your son's potential. I'm investing in his future because I know he'll succeed. Jack fell silent, clearly torn between pride and the desire to see his son progress. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Let me think about it, Jack finally said. Richard agreed and went up to his office. Throughout the day, he couldn't focus on any tasks. His mind was entirely fixed on Jack and Tyler's situation. Edward noticed his partner's distraction and decided to bring it up. Richard, you're different today. Does it have to do with that story about the old employee? It does. I'm thinking of helping his son get an education. Edward visibly tensed. Richard, you need to be careful with gestures like that. People might interpret it as an admission of guilt. If that man decides to take legal action, you'll be giving him ammunition. Edward, do you really think Jack Wilson was stealing company materials? Richard, that was 15 years ago. Who can be sure of anything after so long? You can. You were in charge of personnel back then. Edward clearly grew uncomfortable with the question. I only reported the evidence that was found in his locker. What evidence exactly? Parts that shouldn't have been there. Company tools. The report is in the files if you want to review it. Richard decided he would review the report as soon as possible. Something about Edward's behavior bothered him. At the end of the day, Richard went back down to the workshop. Jack was alone, cleaning up. Where's Tyler? He went home to do his homework. He can't neglect his studies because of the shop. Richard admired Jack's concern for his son's education. Have you decided about my proposal? Jack stopped sweeping and looked at Richard. I have, but I have a few conditions. What are they? First, Tyler keeps helping me at the shop in his free time. Second, he only accepts the help if he gets a part-time job to pay for at least some of his schooling. Third, if at any point you change your mind or want to back out, you let me know in advance. Richard smiled. I accept all your conditions. In fact, I admire how you're raising Tyler. He's an exceptional young man. He's the most important thing in the world to me, Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. At that moment, Richard realized he had found something his money could never buy, a family bound by genuine love and strong values. In the following days, Richard started visiting the shop regularly. At first, he used the excuse of checking on his car, but it soon became clear he was genuinely interested in learning more about Jack and Tyler's work. Tyler was excited about the prospect of continuing his studies, but insisted on finding a part-time job. Richard discreetly spoke with a few suppliers and arranged for one of them to offer Tyler a weekend job as an administrative assistant. Dad, I got the job, Tyler announced, arriving at the shop all excited. I'll be working Saturdays and Sundays at an auto parts company. Jack smiled, proud of his son's determination. Which company? Wilson and Parker Auto Parts. They said they needed someone to organize inventory and help with customer service. Richard, who was at the shop at that moment, tensed up. Wilson and Parker was a supplier for his factory, and he knew the owner, Jason Parker, had close ties to Edward. Tyler, can I ask you something? Who recommended you for this job? No one recommended me, Mr. Richard. I went there myself looking for work. Why? Richard chose not to share his suspicions at that moment, but stayed alert. Tyler started working at Wilson and Parker the following weekend. It was a simple job, but he took it seriously, always arriving on time and completing every task carefully. Jason Parker was impressed by the boy's dedication and began trusting him with more important tasks. Tyler had access to the inventory system and started noticing inconsistencies in the records. Mr. Jason, there are some parts here in stock that aren't logged in the system, Tyler mentioned one Saturday morning. Jason seemed nervous at the observation. Oh, those parts came in last night. I haven't had time to log them yet. Tyler accepted the explanation, but kept noticing similar irregularities in the following weekends. There were always parts that just arrived the night before, or went out but haven't been updated in the system yet. One Saturday, Tyler arrived early for work and found Edward Miller speaking quietly with Jason Parker in the office. They didn't see him come in, and he overheard part of the conversation. Are you sure the kid doesn't suspect anything? Edward asked. Positive. He's young, doesn't understand business. He just does what I tell him. Keep it that way. If Richard finds out about our scheme through him, we're screwed. Tyler felt his heart race. What scheme? What were those men hiding? What about his father? Edward continued. Richard has been spending a lot of time at that auto shop. Jack Wilson is still a problem. He knows the company's processes too well. If Richard decides to investigate what happened 15 years ago, that's why I had him fired back then. He was too sharp, asked too many questions. Tyler had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. Edward had been responsible for his father's unfair dismissal. What if he finds out we faked the evidence? Jason asked. He won't. The documents were destroyed properly, and the only people who knew the truth are the two of us. Tyler quietly left the building and stood on the sidewalk, trying to process what he'd heard. Edward and Jason had set up his father 15 years ago, and now they were involved in some scheme that could hurt Richard. For the rest of the workday, Tyler pretended everything was normal, but his mind burned with anger and outrage. When he got home, he found his father in the shop, working as usual. "Dad, I need to tell you something important." Jack stopped what he was doing and gave his son his full attention. Tyler recounted everything he'd heard, from the inventory discrepancies to the conversation between Edward and Jason. Jack listened in silence, his expression growing grimmer by the minute. "Are you sure about what you heard, son?" "Absolutely, Dad. They admitted they falsified evidence against you." Jack sank heavily into a chair. For 15 years, he'd wondered if there might have been some misunderstanding. Now he knew he'd been the victim of a deliberate conspiracy. "What are we going to do, Dad?" Jack was silent for several minutes, clearly torn between anger and caution. "We'll tell Richard everything. He deserves to know what kind of man his partner is. What if he doesn't believe us? Then at least we'll have done our part. I can't let them do to him what they did to me." The next day, Jack and Tyler went to Richard's office. Richard immediately sensed something serious had happened. "What's wrong? You two look like you've seen a ghost." Tyler told the whole story again, leaving out no details. Richard listened in deepening silence, his expression growing darker. "Are you sure about this?" "Richard," Jack said, "I know you have no reason to trust my word, but my son doesn't lie. He's never lied in his life." Richard believed Tyler, but he knew he needed concrete evidence to confront Edward. "Tyler, do you still have access to Wilson and Parker's inventory system?" "Yes, sir." "Can you print out some reports of the discrepancies you noticed?" "I can, but they might get suspicious if I print too much." Richard thought for a few seconds. "Just do what you can without raising alarms. I need proof before I can act." Tyler agreed, and Richard promised to investigate discreetly. Over the next few days, Tyler managed to gather some evidence of the inventory irregularities. Whenever possible, he took photos of documents with his basic phone or made discreet notes. Edward, meanwhile, began to suspect Richard was looking into something. He noticed his partner asking odd questions about suppliers and questioning some old contracts. "Richard, you've been awfully investigative lately. Is something going on?" "Just reviewing some processes, Edward. It's important to keep everything organized." "Does it have to do with that mechanic you've been visiting?" Richard noticed Edward's nervousness. "Why do you ask?" "I know you've been going to his shop. People talk." "You need to be careful, Richard. That man might be trying to take advantage of your kindness." "Edward, do you know Jack Wilson well?" "Not really. Only what's in the company records." Richard decided to test his partner. "I'm thinking of hiring him back. What do you think?" Edward visibly tensed up. "I think it's a terrible idea. Someone who was fired for cause should never get a second chance at the same company. Even if the firing was a mistake." "Richard, it wasn't a mistake. There was clear evidence." "What evidence exactly? Do you remember?" Edward hesitated before answering. "Parts, tools. It was all documented." "I'd like to review that documentation." "Richard, that was 15 years ago. I doubt the files even exist anymore." Richard knew Edward was lying. Their company kept all records archived for 20 years for legal reasons. That afternoon, Richard went to the company archives himself. He found Jack Wilson's file without any trouble. The termination report was there, signed by Edward, but something caught his attention. The evidence mentioned in the report wasn't attached to the documents. There was only a description of the alleged misconduct. No photos, no proof, no witnesses besides Edward himself. Richard photographed the entire file and decided to confront Edward the next day. But first, he wanted to warn Jack and Tyler about what he'd found. At the end of the day, he went down to the shop. Father and son were finishing up work on a truck engine. "I found your termination report, Jack." Jack stopped what he was doing. "And?" "There's no real evidence attached, just Edward's word." Tyler stepped closer. "Does that mean my dad was fired unfairly?" "It means there's a strong chance you were right about the conspiracy." Jack felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief that his honesty had been preserved, and anger for having suffered so much over a lie. What are you going to do with this information? Jack asked. I'm going to confront Edward tomorrow. But first, I want you both to know that no matter what happens, I'll make sure Tyler can keep studying. Tyler thanked him, but Jack remained serious. Richard, you realize that if you do this, you might lose your partner and face problems in the company? I do, but I can't live with this injustice, and if Edward was capable of doing this to you, he might be involved in other wrongdoing. The next morning, Richard arrived early at the office and asked Edward to come to his room. He placed Jack's file on the desk. Edward, we need to clarify some things about this case. Edward looked at the file and turned pale. Richard, why are you digging this up? It's in the past. Because I've discovered it might not have been a fair case. What do you mean? Where's the physical evidence that led to the termination? Edward grew nervous, fidgeting with his hands and avoiding Richard's gaze. It was disposed of after the case was closed. Edward, our company never disposes of disciplinary evidence. That's against our policy. Richard, are you doubting my word? I'm questioning a process that seems to have serious flaws. Edward stood up, clearly agitated. Richard, that man is manipulating you. He can't accept that he was fired for theft and now he's using his son to win your sympathy. Edward, answer me one direct question. Did you fabricate evidence against Jack Wilson? Of course not. How could you accuse me of something like that? Richard watched him silently for a few seconds. Then you won't mind if I hire an expert to investigate the case? Edward panicked. Richard, that'll cost a fortune and prove nothing. It's money down the drain. I don't care about the cost. I want to clear the name of a man who may have been wronged. Edward noticed Richard was determined and decided to change his approach. All right, Richard. If that's what you want, we'll investigate. But when you find out I was right, I expect an apology. Richard agreed, but deep down, he knew Edward was bluffing. That afternoon, Richard hired an independent auditing firm to look into the case. He also reached out to Jack to update him on the developments. Jack, I've hired a firm to investigate your dismissal. If there were indeed irregularities in the process, you'll be officially cleared. Jack was moved. Richard, I don't know how to thank you. No need. It's the least I can do. Tyler, who was present, asked a question that surprised both men. Mr. Richard, what if we find out Mr. Edward has been stealing from the company all these years? Richard paused. Why do you ask that, Tyler? Because at Wilson & Parker, I've noticed that whenever new shipments arrive, some of the goods disappear without being logged, and Mr. Edward visits the company every week. A chill ran down Richard's spine. He hadn't considered that possibility, but it made sense. If Edward was capable of fabricating evidence, he could also be involved in other illegal schemes. Tyler, can you still document these irregularities? I can, but I'll have to be careful not to get caught. Only do what's safe. I don't want you taking any risks. In the following days, tensions rose at the company. Edward realized he was under investigation and began acting strangely, canceling meetings and avoiding contact with Richard. Tyler continued working at Wilson & Parker and managed to photograph several documents proving the inventory discrepancies. He discovered a pattern. Shipments arrived with normal invoices, but some of the goods were diverted before being logged into the system. One Friday, Tyler overheard Jason Parker making a phone call to Edward. Edward, the kid's asking too many questions. I think he suspects something. Then get rid of him. I can't. Richard indirectly recommended him. Firing him now would raise suspicions. Then keep him away from the important documents. Tyler knew he was running out of time to gather more evidence. He acted quickly, photographing several key documents that same day. When he got home, he showed everything to his father. Dad, I think I've uncovered the whole scheme. They've been stealing from Mr. Richard's company for years. Jack examined the photos Tyler had taken. Son, this is very serious. You could be in danger. Why? Because if they find out you know all this, they might try to silence you. For the first time since uncovering the conspiracy, Tyler felt afraid. What should we do? We'll go to Richard immediately and hand everything over to him. Father and son went to Richard's office on Saturday morning. Richard had given them a key in case of emergencies. "Richard," Jack said as soon as he arrived, "my son has uncovered something very serious." Tyler showed all the photos and explained the theft scheme. Richard reviewed them with growing outrage. "Tyler, do you have any idea how much money this amounts to?" "I'm not sure, sir. But from the quantities I've seen, it must be a lot." Richard did some quick calculations based on the photos. "We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. If this has been going on for a long time, it could be millions," Jack finished. Richard felt a mix of anger and sorrow. Edward had been his partner for 10 years, and throughout that entire time he had been systematically stealing from him. "I'm going to confront Edward on Monday." "Richard," said Jack, "you need to be careful. If he's done all this for so long, he could be dangerous when cornered." "What kind of danger?" "I don't know, but desperate people do desperate things." Richard promised to be careful and thanked Tyler once again for uncovering the truth. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. On Sunday, Richard spent the day reviewing all the documents and preparing for the confrontation. He also contacted his lawyer to get advice on the legal steps to take. On Monday morning, Richard called Edward into his office for a meeting. He laid all the evidence on the table. "Edward, I need you to explain these irregularities at Wilson and Parker." Edward looked at the documents and turned pale. "Where did you get this?" "That doesn't matter. What matters is that you explain why goods are leaving our company without being recorded." Edward tried to stay calm, but he was visibly nervous. "Richard, there must be some mistake. I need to look at these documents more carefully." "There's no mistake, Edward, and this explains a lot, including why you wanted to get rid of Jack Wilson 15 years ago." "What are you implying?" "Jack was very observant, wasn't he? He probably would have noticed the irregularities if he'd stayed with the company." Edward realized he'd been caught and decided to go on the attack. "Richard, you don't understand anything. This company only grew because I did what was necessary. You've always been too honest, too rigid. In business, sometimes you have to be flexible." "Flexible? You call theft flexibility? I call it a survival strategy. How many companies have closed because their owners were too honest?" Richard couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Edward, you stole from me for years and you still think you did the right thing. I did what I had to do to keep this company competitive." The argument was heating up. Edward got up from his chair and started pacing the room. "Richard, you can report me, you can sue me, you can do whatever you want, but know this, without me, you never would have gotten where you are. And without your dishonesty, I would have gone even further." Edward stopped pacing and glared at Richard with hatred. "You've always been naive, Richard. The business world isn't a fairy tale. It's war. And in war, we can't always choose our weapons. Edward, you're fired, and I'll take all legal measures to recover what was stolen." Edward laughed bitterly. "You think it'll be easy to prove anything? You think I didn't take precautions all these years? I think you underestimated the intelligence of a 13-year-old boy." At that moment, Edward realized it was Tyler who had uncovered the scheme. "That boy, he was spying on me. He was working honestly and noticed the irregularities." Edward was furious. "I'll sue you for using a child to spy on me." Tyler wasn't spying on anyone. He was doing his job and being observant. Edward completely lost control. "This isn't over. I'll destroy you. I'll destroy your company. I'll destroy that family of mechanics you protect so much." Richard stood up. "Edward, you're out of line. I suggest you leave the building now before you say something you'll regret even more." "I already regret a lot of things, Richard. Mostly partnering with someone as weak as you." Edward stormed out of the room, slamming the door. Richard was alone, still processing everything that had happened. A few hours later, Richard went down to the workshop to tell Jack and Tyler about the confrontation. "So? How did it go?" asked Tyler eagerly. "Edward confessed everything. He's fired from the company." Jack sighed in relief. "What about my dismissal?" "The independent audit confirmed there was no real evidence. You've been officially cleared of all charges." Tyler hugged his father, emotional. "Dad," the truth finally came out. Jack's eyes were moist. 15 years carrying this stain on my reputation. "Jack," said Richard, "I want to make you an official offer. Will you become my partner?" "Richard, we've talked about this before. But now it's different. I need someone I can trust completely. Someone with integrity who knows the business." Tyler encouraged his father. "Dad, I think you should accept. Mr. Richard is a good man." Jack was thoughtful for a few minutes. "Richard, if I accept, it'll be as a minority partner, and on the condition that Tyler continues his studies and graduates before working at the company. I accept all your conditions. And one more thing. I want part of the company's profits to go towards social projects for young people in the community." Richard smiled. "Jack, you never cease to amaze me. I accept that condition too." The three hugged, moved by the turn their lives had taken. But the joy didn't last long. The following week, strange things began happening. The workshop was broken into overnight, but nothing was stolen. Richard's car had its tires slashed in the company parking lot. Tyler received anonymous, threatening calls. "Dad, I think Mr. Edward is trying to get revenge," said Tyler one morning after another threatening call. "I think so too," agreed Jack. "We need to tell Richard." When Richard heard about the intimidation, he grew concerned. "I'll talk to my lawyer about security measures." "Richard," said Jack, "we don't want to cause you more trouble." "You're not causing trouble, Edward is, and this only proves we did the right thing by reporting him." Richard hired a security company to watch the workshop and his home. He also advised Tyler to always stay with others and avoid isolated places. The threats continued for a few weeks, but gradually faded. Edward seemed to have given up on his intimidation attempts. During this time, the partnership between Richard and Jack began to flourish. Jack brought a practical, realistic perspective to the business, while Richard contributed his strategic vision and financial resources. Tyler adjusted well to his new study routine. He was enrolled in an industrial mechanics program at one of the city's best schools, still helping at the workshop on weekends. One day, while Richard was at the workshop discussing expansion plans with Jack, he received an unexpected call. "Richard, this is Detective Johnson. I need to talk to you about Edward Miller." "What happened?" "He was arrested last night trying to set fire to one of your company's warehouses." Richard was shocked. "Set fire? Are you sure?" "Absolutely. We caught him red-handed with incendiary materials and everything. He confessed he wanted revenge against you." "Is he okay?" "Physically, yes. But mentally, he seems disturbed. Keeps saying you ruined his life." Richard hung up and told Jack and Tyler everything. "Thank God he was arrested before he could do anything," said Jack. "Dad, it's so sad to see someone destroy themselves like that," Tyler remarked. Richard agreed. Edward wasn't a bad person at first. Ambition and dishonesty turned him into something he didn't even recognize anymore. "This is a lesson for all of us," said Jack. "No matter how hard life gets, we can never give up on our values." With Edward in jail and the threats gone, the family could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Richard's company, now with Jack as a partner, began to thrive even more. Richard implemented stricter transparency and ethics policies. He also created a scholarship program for employees' children, inspired by Tyler's story. Tyler, in turn, was excelling at technical school. His teachers constantly praised his ability to diagnose complex problems and his creativity in finding solutions. One weekend, Tyler was in the shop helping his father when he had an innovative idea. "Dad, I have an idea for a school project." "What idea, son?" "I want to develop a diagnostic system that uses engine sounds to automatically identify problems." Jack was intrigued. "How would it work?" "The mechanic would connect a special microphone to the engine, and a computer program would analyze the sounds and point out possible issues." Richard, who was there, was impressed. "Tyler, that's brilliant. It would revolutionize automotive mechanics." "Do you really think I could do it, Mr. Richard?" "Absolutely. And I'd like to fund the development of your project." Tyler was excited but looked to his father for approval. "Son, if you can create this, you'll help mechanics all over the world." Tyler threw himself into the project with passion. He spent months studying acoustics, programming, and advanced mechanics. Richard arranged for some engineers from the company to help him with the more technical aspects. Tyler's project caught attention at school and even from some automotive companies. A multinational corporation made $1 million offer to buy the patent for his invention. "Tyler," Richard said, "the decision is yours. But before you choose, I want you to think carefully about what you want to do with your life." "I already have, Mr. Richard. I want to accept the offer, but on one condition." "What's that?" "That part of the money be used to create a free training center for young mechanics here in our community." Jack smiled, proud of his son. "And the other part?" "I want to invest in expanding my dad's shop, turn it into a community technical school." Richard was moved by the boy's generosity. "Tyler, are you sure about this? That's a lot of money to give up." "Mr. Richard, money only has value if it's used to help others. My dad taught me that." Tyler's proposal was accepted by the multinational company. The training center was built next to Jack's shop, which was expanded and modernized. On the day of the opening, a crowd gathered: journalists, business owners, local politicians, and dozens of young people from the community who would be the center's first students. Tyler, now 15, gave an emotional speech. "It all started when I saw a car catch fire and decided to help. I learned that small actions can have huge consequences. Today, this center exists so other young people can have the same opportunities I did." Jack also spoke during the ceremony. "For 15 years, I carried the pain of an injustice. Today, I can say it was worth the wait. Sometimes, what seems like a tragedy is just the beginning of something wonderful." Richard closed the speeches. "Tyler and Jack taught me that true success isn't measured by the money we accumulate, but by the lives we positively touch." In the following months, the training center graduated dozens of young mechanics. Many found jobs at local companies, while others opened their own shops. Tyler kept studying and developing new projects. His sound-based diagnostic system revolutionized the automotive industry and was implemented in shops worldwide. Jack found fulfillment watching his son grow into an upright and successful young man. The auto shop, now turned into a school, was his greatest source of pride. Richard learned that true wealth lies in genuine relationships and the chance to make a difference in people's lives. 2 years after the center opened, Tyler graduated high school with the top grades in his class. Several universities offered him scholarships. "Dad, I've decided to study mechanical engineering." "Great choice, son. Where will you study?" "At the State University here. I want to stay close to the training center." "Why?" "Because I still have a lot of work to do here in the community." Jack hugged his son, moved. "Son, you make me proud every day." Tyler enrolled in college but remained involved with the training center. On weekends, he taught younger students and developed new projects. During his 3rd year, Tyler made a discovery that would change his life forever. While organizing old shop documents, he found a folder with yellowed papers. "Dad, what are these documents?" Jack looked at the folder thoughtfully. "They're very old papers, son, from when I worked at Richard's first company." Tyler flipped through the documents and found something interesting. Birth certificates, family records, and some old photos. "Dad, who's this man in the photo with you?" Jack looked at the picture and sighed. "That's my older brother, son." "Brother? I have an uncle." "You had one." "I don't know if he's still alive." Tyler studied the photo more closely. The man had familiar features, but there was something else. "Dad, this man looks like Mr. Richard." Jack took the photo and examined it carefully. It had been so many years since he'd seen those images. "Tyler, what's Richard's full name?" "Richard Thompson Adams." "Why?" Jack turned pale. "Because my brother's name was Richard Adams. He changed his last name when he left home." Tyler couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Dad, are you saying Richard is your brother?" "It's possible, son. Very possible." Tyler grabbed his phone and called Richard. "Mr. Richard, can you come to the shop? We've discovered something very important." Richard arrived in 15 minutes, puzzled by the urgency in Tyler's voice. "What happened?" Tyler showed him the photo and documents. "Mr. Richard, what was your mother's maiden name?" "Wilson. Mary Wilson." "Why?" Jack stepped closer. Richard, when were you born? March 15th, 1968. Jack, why these questions? Jack showed his brother's birth certificate. Because my older brother was born on that exact date, named Richard Wilson Adams. Richard looked at the document, then at Jack. The resemblance Tyler had noticed became obvious to everyone. Jack, are you Jackie? And you're Rich? The two brothers embraced, crying. Tyler watched the scene, moved and stunned by the extraordinary coincidence. Richard, why did you change your name? Jack asked. When I started working, I thought Richard Thompson sounded more professional for business. I ended up making it official. And why did you never look for me? Richard hung his head, ashamed. Because when I got rich, I became someone I didn't recognize. I was ashamed of what I'd turned into. Richard, do you remember the last time we spoke? I do. You asked for a loan to pay for Sarah's medical treatment, and I refused. It wasn't just that. You said I was a failure and didn't want to be associated with people like me. Richard grew even more ashamed. Jack, I was an arrogant fool. Success had gone to my head. Sarah ended up passing because we couldn't afford the treatment in time. Tyler discovered he had lost his mother because of his own uncle's refusal to help. He felt a mix of anger and sadness. Was Sarah my mother? Tyler asked. She was, son. A wonderful woman you unfortunately never got to know. Richard was devastated. Jack, I didn't know Sarah had... I didn't know. Of course you didn't. After you rejected me, I cut off all contact. Tyler looked at the two men, trying to process all the revelations. Dad, does this mean Mr. Richard is my uncle? It does, son. Richard knelt in front of Tyler. Tyler, can you forgive me? I may not have been there for your childhood, but I want to be part of your future. Tyler looked to his father for guidance. Son, the decision is yours. Tyler thought for a few minutes. Mr. Richard, you made many mistakes in the past, but you've also done a lot for our family in recent years. Tyler, I accept you as my uncle, but on one condition. What? That you tell me everything about my mother. I want to know her story. Richard agreed, moved. In the following days, Richard told Tyler everything he remembered about Sarah. He showed old photos, shared stories from their childhood. There had been a younger sister who passed away as a child, and helped Tyler connect with his family roots. Tyler, your mother was the most generous person I ever knew. She always helped everyone, even when she was struggling herself. Did she look like me? Physically, you take more after your father, but in temperament, you're just like her. Tyler was happy to know he had inherited his mother's positive traits. The revelation of the family ties between Richard and Jack brought a new dynamic to their relationships. Richard started visiting Jack's home regularly, trying to make up for lost time. Emily, Richard's wife, was delighted to discover she had a brother-in-law and a nephew. Ashley, Richard's daughter, who was studying medicine in another city, came to visit as soon as she heard the news. Dad, I can't believe you have a brother and a nephew and never told me. Ashley, I didn't know either. I lost touch with my family years ago. Ashley got along well with Tyler despite their age difference. She was 22 and he was 17, but they formed a genuine friendship. Tyler, do you want me to help you with any college subjects? I'd love that, cousin, especially physics and math. The reunited family decided to spend that year's Christmas all together. It was the first time in over 20 years the brothers had celebrated an important occasion side by side. During dinner, Richard gave an emotional speech. Jack, Tyler, Emily, Ashley, you've given me back something I thought I'd lost forever, a real family. Tyler replied, Uncle Richard, sometimes God uses strange paths to teach us important lessons. If I hadn't put out that fire, none of this would have happened, Jack added. And if I'd held on to bitterness all these years, we wouldn't be here together either. Emily, moved by the whole story, made a suggestion. Why don't we take a family trip during the next vacation to get to know each other better? Everyone agreed. Tyler was graduating with honors in engineering. His thesis on intelligent automotive diagnostic systems caught the attention of several companies and universities. On graduation day, the whole family was there. Richard and Jack were proud of the young man they'd watched grow. Tyler, Richard said during the celebration lunch. "What are your plans now?" "I want to get my master's, Uncle, but I also want to expand the training center." "Expand how?" "I want to create a network of centers in other cities, bringing opportunities to young people across the state." Jack smiled. "Son, you'll never stop surprising me." "Dad, I learned from you that success only matters when it's shared." Richard offered to finance the expansion, but Tyler refused. "Uncle, I'd rather find investors who believe in the project. That way it'll have more legitimacy." Tyler presented his expansion plan to several business owners and secured the necessary funding. Within 2 years, training centers were established in 5 different cities. Each center graduated around 50 young people per year, totaling hundreds of new skilled professionals annually. The project gained national attention. Tyler was invited to speak at universities and conferences about social entrepreneurship. At one of these events, he met Jessica Roberts, a young engineer who worked on social projects in education. "Tyler, your project is inspiring. I'd love to visit one of the centers in person." "Of course. Anytime you'd like, you can visit the center here in our city." Jessica toured the center and was impressed by its organization and results. "Tyler, have you ever thought about expanding into other fields beyond mechanics?" "What do you mean?" "Electronics, IT, welding. There are so many industries in need of skilled workers." Tyler liked the idea and began dating Jessica. She became his partner in both personal life and professional projects. Jack immediately approved of his son's choice. "Jessica is a smart young woman with strong values. She'll be a wonderful companion for you." Richard also took a liking to his niece-in-law. "Tyler, Jessica has the same generosity as you. You make a great pair." On the 5th anniversary of the training center, the family organized a big celebration. Hundreds of former students attended, many now established in their careers. Jason, one of the first graduates, approached Tyler. "Tyler, I want to thank you. If it weren't for the center, I'd still be unemployed." "Jason, the credit is yours. You worked hard and earned your success. But the opportunity came from here. That's why I want to give back." Jason had become the owner of a small repair shop and wanted to hire exclusively graduates from the center. "Tyler, I'd like to create a network of businesses that prioritize professionals trained at the centers." The idea spread, and several other companies joined the initiative. Graduates from the centers soon had an employment rate of nearly 100%. Tyler married Jessica in a simple but heartfelt ceremony. Jack walked the bride down the aisle, as her father had passed away years earlier. "Jessica," Jack said during the wedding, "you're marrying a special young man, but I'm sure you'll build an even more special family together." Richard gave the best man speech. "Tyler, watching you grow into the man you are today has been one of the greatest privileges of my life. Jessica, welcome to the family." The couple moved into a modest home near the training center, wanting to stay directly involved with the project. 2 years later, Jessica gave birth to a baby girl named Sarah, in honor of the grandmother she never met. Jack was moved when he heard the chosen name. "Tyler, your mother would have been so happy to know her granddaughter carries her name." "Dad, I want little Sarah to grow up knowing her grandmother's story and understanding the importance of helping others." Richard, now a proud honorary grandfather, melted at the arrival of the baby. "Jack, seeing Tyler as a father reminds me of how we were as kids." "Richard, time has passed, but what matters has stayed the same." With the birth of their daughter, Tyler began thinking differently about the future. "Jessica, I want our daughter to grow up in a fairer world. How can we contribute to that?" "By expanding the centers even further. I want every American child to have access to quality vocational education." Tyler came up with an ambitious plan to create 1,000 training centers in 10 years. The project required complex organization and significant funding. "Tyler," said Richard, "this project is too grand to be funded solely by private investors. What do you suggest, Uncle?" "Turn it into public policy. Present the project to the government." Tyler and Jessica spent 2 years preparing a detailed proposal. They presented the project to various government agencies. The project was approved and became a national vocational education program. Tyler was appointed general coordinator, responsible for overseeing its implementation across the country. "Dad," Tyler said on the day the decree was signed, "we did it. Son, you did it. I just taught you the first steps." "Not at all. If you hadn't taught me to do good without expecting anything in return, none of this would exist." The national program was an absolute success. Within 5 years, there were training centers in every state, shaping thousands of young people annually. Tyler became a national reference in vocational education and social entrepreneurship. He received numerous awards and recognition, but never lost his humility. In an interview with a national magazine, the reporter asked, "Tyler, how do you explain your success?" "It all started with a simple lesson. When we see someone in need, we help, without expecting anything in return." "Who taught you that?" "My father, Jack Wilson, the most upright man I know." The interview moved the entire country. Jack, now 70, remained active in the shop, which had become a sort of experimental lab for new teaching methods. "Dad," Tyler said during a visit, "don't you want to retire?" "Retire from what, son? Hundreds of skilled professionals have come from this shop. This is my legacy." Richard, also older but still active, agreed. "Jack, you've turned this place into a symbol of hope." "Richard, we did it together. Alone, I wouldn't have achieved anything." Tyler watched the two brothers, reconciled and united by a common cause. "Uncle Richard, Dad, you taught me it's never too late to correct mistakes and build something new." On the 10th anniversary of the first training center, a grand national celebration was held. Alumni from across the country attended, many now established as successful entrepreneurs and professionals. Jack, now recognized as the father of community vocational education, gave the opening speech. "20 years ago, my son put out a fire. He didn't know that act would ignite hope in thousands of young Americans." Tyler added, "My father taught me that small actions can have big consequences. Today, we know that's true." Richard, moved, concluded the speeches. "Tyler and Jack taught me that true wealth isn't in what we accumulate, but in what we plant for future generations." The celebration was broadcast nationwide and became a milestone in American education history. Tyler, now 35, was at the peak of his career, but his greatest joy remained spending weekends at his father's shop, teaching young mechanics. "Daddy," said little Sarah, now 10, "why do you still work at Grandpa's shop?" "Because that's where I learned everything I know about life, sweetheart." "Can I learn too?" Tyler looked at Jessica, who smiled in approval. "Of course you can. Your grandpa will be thrilled to teach you." Sarah began visiting the shop and showed the same natural talent as her father and grandfather for mechanics, but her passion was different. She wanted to be a teacher. "Grandpa Jack, I want to teach other kids like Daddy teaches the young ones." "Great idea, Sarah. The world always needs good teachers." Tyler was proud of his daughter and supported her dreams. "Sarah, whatever career you choose, always remember to use your talents to help others." Years later, when Sarah was finishing high school, Jack had a health issue. Nothing serious, but it forced him to slow down. "Dad, it's time to retire for real," insisted Tyler. "All right, son, but only if you promise the shop will keep running." "I promise, Dad. And I have a surprise for you." Tyler had prepared a special tribute. He turned the original shop into a museum of vocational education, preserving all the historic tools and equipment. "Dad, this place will be visited by generations of students. Your story will be told forever." Jack cried with emotion. "Tyler, I never imagined a simple shop could become something so important." "Dad, important places aren't defined by the buildings, but by the people who pass through them. The museum's opening brought together thousands of people. Former students, teachers, officials, and young students came to honor the man who had dedicated his life to education." Sarah, now studying pedagogy, gave a speech representing the new generation. "My grandfather Jack taught me that educating is planting dreams. Today, we are the fruits of the tree he planted." Tyler was moved seeing his daughter carry on the family values. "Sarah, you'll be an extraordinary teacher." "Daddy, I want to create schools that combine traditional education with vocational training." "Explain more." "Schools where children learn math by building things, learn English by writing technical manuals, learn science through hands-on practice. Tyler was fascinated by his daughter's idea. Sarah, that's brilliant, want to develop a pilot project. Yes, Daddy, but with one condition. What? That Grandpa Jack be our lead consultant. Jack, despite his age, accepted the challenge. Sarah, it'll be my pleasure to help you revolutionize education. Sarah's project was piloted in 5 schools. The results were extraordinary. Students showed greater interest in learning and better academic performance. Grandpa, Sarah said after seeing the first results, it works. Of course it works, my dear. When we combine theory and practice, learning becomes natural. Sarah's project expanded nationwide and became a global benchmark for innovative education. Tyler was proud of how his daughter carried on the family legacy. Jessica, our daughter has exceeded even our expectations. Tyler, she just followed the example she grew up with. Richard, now 80, still kept up with the family's projects. Jack, you've created a dynasty of educators. Richard, we created it. This family is the result of what we built together. On Jack's 100th birthday, the whole family gathered to celebrate. 3 generations were present. Jack, Tyler, and Jessica, Sarah and her husband, a young teacher she'd met in college. Grandpa, Sarah said, tell the fire story again. Sarah, you've heard this story 1,000 times. But it never gets old. And now my kids need to hear it too. Sarah had just given birth to twins, a boy and a girl. Jack, holding his great-grandchildren, told once more the story that had changed their lives. It was a Thursday morning when Tyler saw that car catching fire. Tyler listened with the same interest as always. No matter how well he knew every detail, he never tired of remembering how it all began. Dad, if I'd known where that act would lead us. Tyler, it's precisely because you didn't know that the act was so pure. You helped without calculating the consequences, Richard concluded. And he taught me that it's never too late to be a better person. Sarah looked at her newborn children. Grandpa, what values do you want me to pass on to them? The same ones I've always taught. Honesty, generosity, and the certainty that small actions can change the world. Tyler hugged his father. Dad, thank you for teaching me to do good without expecting anything in return. Son, thank you for giving me the chance to see that good multiply. Jessica, watching the scene, remarked, this family is proof that love and education are the only legacies that truly matter. Richard, moved, reflected, Tyler, when you put out that fire so many years ago, you were actually lighting a flame that still shines today. Sarah concluded, and it will continue to shine for many generations to come. The end of the story. Now tell us, what did you think of this touching story? Do you believe small gestures can really change entire lives? Leave a comment sharing your thoughts on the Wilson family's journey, and don't forget to like if the story touched your heart. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that will move you.